Good evening and welcome to the Millis Public Schools School Committee meeting of January 17, 2023. Before we begin, I want to announce that this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on Mondays at 7 p.m. on Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 37. All meetings videos are also posted on the Millis Public Schools website under School Committee. All videos are also available on YouTube. All school committee minutes and agendas can be found on the school committee page of the Millis Public School website. Persons wishing to speak during open session must sign in before the meeting starts. Comments are not to exceed 3 minutes in time. Individuals may not name students, staff, or parents. All topics for discussion must be limited to those items on this evening's agenda, and all comments must be directed to the chair. The committee may not respond to public comments. It shall be their decision to discuss issues at a later date. All times on the agenda are approximate. I'll start with the roll call. I am the chairperson, Stephen Catalano. Secretary, Ms. Gibbons, Denise Gibbons.
Present.
Ms. Briggs is not here tonight. Mr. Conroy
Here.
is here. Ms. Roach won't be here. The superintendent is here. Mr. Wiggin, the director of school finance and Human Resources, is also here. Is there anyone signed in for open session?
No.
Okay. So before we begin into the action items, Mr. Mullaney, the superintendent, would like to.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Sue Lappin, who was a longtime aide up in the middle school. She started working in Millis in 1986 and retired in 2019. She had 33 years working in the middle school, helping a generation of kids get through some difficult times at those ages. I'd just like to send our condolences to Sue's family.
Thank you, Bob. For the action items, we have two action items. One is the consideration to approve the 1/3/23 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
make a motion that we approve the January 3rd, 2023 school committee minutes as presented.
Second.
A motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The second action item is the consideration to approve the admittance of Westboro Public Schools into the Accept Collaborative. Mr. Mullaney.
Yes, Westboro has applied for admission to Accept Collaborative, and because of the bylaws of the collaborative and state law, it requires a vote from the school committee of each district that's part of the collaborative. And Westboro is a high-performing district whose mission aligns closely with that of Millis and the other member schools in the district. There would be no financial impact to Millis, no negative financial impact to our district, and we believe adding another high-performing district to the collaborative would, in the long run, be very beneficial. And the Accept Board of Directors recommended approving the admittance of Westboro, and in the packets there's a letter from the superintendent of the Westboro Public Schools, as well as a letter from Donna Flaherty, the executive director of Accept.
Any questions for Mr. Mullaney? I'll take a motion then.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I make a motion that we approve the admittance of Westboro Public Schools into the Accept Collaborative.
Second.
A motion's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is we do not have a student rep. They both seem to be at the basketball game. I could pull myself away. They chose to stay. I guess school spirit trumps student reps, right? The teacher rep is here. Ms. Copese, would you like to come up forward?
Alrighty. I missed you last time, Mr. Catalano.
I was a little under the weather.
Sorry, are you feeling better?
I am feeling much better.
Much happy to hear about that.
Thank you.
All right, we have, I have to say, my colleagues have given us a wealth of things to share this evening, so I will run through them for you. It's kind of fun to get to hear what's going on. So first off, the first grade was awarded a merit grant for hands-on learning. They're going to get math and language arts materials and games to help students practice the established skills. Mr. Kamere joined the third graders on a virtual ocean voyage. And so they were using that to supplement their studies in the new Wit and Wisdom reading program. And so he'll be traveling with all of the third grade classrooms in the weeks to come. Kayla Bazil and Michelle Adams visited Medfield Public Schools to watch first and fifth grade math lessons for illustrative math, as we are looking at different things. Medfield is currently piloting 3 programs, and so we're kind of glomming on and seeing what they think about these programs. Scott Sangiacomo, an author and illustrator of the graphic novel Bedhead Ted, visited the 4th and 5th grade students today, actually. Report cards are coming out of the CFB on Friday the 20th. Ooh, the dental associates are coming for their Smart Smiles presentation on dental health for pre-KK and first graders next week. The grade 2 Spanish immersion program was awarded a merit grant for curriculum materials that combine music and phonics called, okay, I probably should take Spanish. Might do this with a friend. Canciones y Cientos.
Sounds perfect.
Sounds great. Next time I'll have Wilson give me phonetic spelling of that. And grade 4 is working with Rachel Silverman, the youth librarian at the library, to do Elephant and Piggy Readers Theater. They are rehearsing and will be performing for the grade 1 classes. In the middle school, the 7th and 8th grade yoga program got a grant from Merit, so they will get to continue doing their relaxation activities. They're very excited. They also got a grant for an in-house field trip from Cheryl Fay, and she's going to be doing her one-woman show reenacting some of the Diary of Anne Frank for the students. So she's been here before, and the students really engaged, and it brought that all to life. The middle school ELA department has as a whole received a merit grant to attend the conference, What's New in Young Adult Literature and How to Use It in Your Program. So they're super excited to be getting a heads up on new novels and ways to kind of get their kids motivated to read. Grade 7 got a merit grant for flexible seating in their math classrooms. So I guess students wanted wobble stools and rolling chairs. And so Merit is going to fund some of this to allow the students some more flexible seating to help their concentration. So that'll be fun. I'm too old for a wobble chair. I'm afraid if I sat in one, it wouldn't be pretty.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going
Feel
to.
free.
First of all, I'm a child because I have like a stupid joke after every one of your announcements. But on the wobble chairs, isn't that going to
Yes.
Yes. Isn't that going to aggravate the teachers? Like, isn't that going to drive people crazy if
I
they're
find
all
middle school teachers are immensely mentally flexible. Like,
This is
honest
not
to
a
God.
negative reflection.
No,
But
no,
if
no,
the
no,
kids are all zooming around, can't that be disruptive?
I would say that I find middle school teachers really super flexible, and their whole goal is to have their students engage with their work. And if, like, when you walk up there, you've got kids sort of doing everything, and they're all working.
All right.
And teachers. So I'm going to say that, like, I'm pretty sure that in my room, if I had kids zooming around on like wheelie chairs, I might get a little stressed out. But up there, I mean, honest, they're an amazing group of folks up there.
Did you see Mr. Ardicki's plan? He said no wobble chairs in the high school. He wrote it down in his school improvement plan. That was a,
I
it
read
was a
the school
sidebar.
improvement plan. I did not see it.
It's in there, trust me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, I will continue, thank you. Grade 6 is going to the Museum of Science to see the planetarium show Mission to Mars on 1/19. And they've been working to promote their acts of kindness, so I'm sure we'll be hearing about that later. I have to say that when I started teaching, Mission to Mars was kind of a joke. Like the idea of it, like that's how old I am. And like now, like it's a real thing, and that's kind of cool. I don't know if it was that way with like going to the moon when my dad was in elementary school, and then like they got to the moon. So it's kind of exciting that for the students, this is like a reality, because when we were all little, I don't think it was as much of a reality. So it's so cool. The 6th grade art students have been learning about traditional Chinese scroll paintings, and they have been producing painted lanterns in celebration of the Lunar New Year. And the art teachers across the district have been working to plan a district-wide art show for April 12th. So I'm sure I'll have more information on that as time progresses. As you all are aware, we had our Professional Learning Day last Friday. So at the middle high school, we got to have an additional training in the question, persuade, and refer, the QPR training, which was really quite wonderful. And that gets followed up with the freshman experience the signs of suicide prevention this week. And then next week on the 25th, thanks to a really generous grant from the Kyle Cares Foundation, we're going to be having The Secret Lives of Teens and Tweens happening in the auditorium from 6 to 8 p.m. The speaker is super dynamic, and for anybody who might be watching this, I highly encourage you, if you have teens or tweens, to come and watch the presentation. He was really amazingly charismatic, talking to us, and super practical, and so I think it'll be valuable to anybody in the community. Other things that happened in the afternoon of that day is the Spanish department was doing some self-guided courses on their new foreign language frameworks. Some of our ELA teachers hosted some other ELA teachers, primarily grade 10, to talk about MCAS and results and what everyone's doing moving forward. The grade 10 teachers met as a team to organize and plan for this year's sophomore research project, incorporating feedback from last year. And the science teachers worked to develop some common lessons. So we've got a grade 11-12 lesson around maple syrup viscosity and conclusion writing. So that's kind of a fun one. In other fun classroom news, Mr. Howden, the speech and language pathologist, visited the anatomy and physiology classes to discuss brain and language development. And so they really were working, he was looking at 2 patients with different types of aphasias, which of course is sort of muddling speech a little bit, and how that was actually, you could see it in the scans in the different areas of the brain. In Chem 2, we continued our studies into plating. We did electroplating, and we turned copper pennies into gold by first electroplating them with zinc, and then heating the zinc and the copper so that the atoms mixed, so the copper and zinc, when they kind of sit next to each other, it looks like gold from afar, kind of like a punctualism painting. If you harken back there, pretty nifty.
Is it gold plating? So it's not technically...
No, it's not gold plating. So what it is you plate the zinc on, so that's electroplating. You need to add in energy. So we had a couple of different techniques we were using. And then you heat the penny, and that causes the zinc atoms and the copper atoms to get mobile, and they mix. And so when you look at it from afar, it appears to be gold because it's zinc, copper, zinc, copper, zinc, copper.
But it's not technically
No,
gold.
it is
It's just
not gold,
the
yes.
appearance.
But it was the way the alchemists way back when could fool people. It's like if you look at a roan horse, it looks red, but really it's white and brown hair, like an alternating pattern. So we have an advisory next week, the optional opioid use survey happening for our grade 11 and 12 students, and that's being sort of hosted in part through the Board of Health. And in TV and film, they are all finishing up their documentaries, and we have a variety of topics from adoption to mushroom foraging to video games to vintage cars and life in Ghana. So those will all be hitting the Millis Memories and the Studio 109 streams shortly. And just in sort of club announcements, the peer leaders are collecting donations. So if you've cleaned out your closet post-holiday, you can drop off donations for the peer leaders thrift shop, which is always a big hit each year. And then the Environmental Action Club has got a bottle and can drive going on. So this is a new club that started this year. So if you've got extra bottles that you want to drop off on Saturday between 9 and noon, they'll be happy to accept them. And finally, from TIES, we've got 2 students getting ready to take their learner permits test. We've got students applying for jobs at CVS, Target, and Dunkin'. Our student at BSU is finishing their 2nd semester and taking intro nutrition courses. And they've had some more fun outings to bowling and the JFK Library in Boston. So it's been a busy couple weeks since I last sat here.
Yes.
It is amazing how much stuff is going on in the district. You do an excellent job, but there's some tremendous stuff
It's crazy,
going on.
but it's all good. So have an enjoyable rest of your meeting, and I'm going to go to my rehearsal.
All right. Enjoy. Thank you, Ms.
You, I
Copese.
shall.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right. Time and learning. Mr. Mulaney.
Okay.
I know it's under your superintendent's report.
Yeah.
Want to do it now? Let's do it now.
Yeah. So I'm very proud to introduce Amy Leone, who's going to talk a little bit about Metro West Health Survey that our students took. As you're well aware, Ms. Leone became the town social worker in July of this year, and the partnership with the schools has been phenomenal. She meets with counseling staff regularly. They've gone over some of the details of the results of the survey, and we've been able to refer families who may be in need of some services to Amy, and her responsiveness has been phenomenal. It's really been a great benefit to the town, and I'm so thankful that town meeting voted to add this to our services in the town. So, with that, I'll
Thank you.
turn it over to Amy.
Welcome.
I have your presentation on my computer if you'd like me to work the slides.
Yeah, that'd be awesome so that everybody can see them, because I think that will be the most helpful to
Great.
you.
Sure.
So I'm excited. This is obviously, like Superintendent said, I've been here since July, so it's been really great seeing this town. When I first had my son, I moved to Millis, so now, like, coming back, he's 20, he's gonna be 20 now, so it's kind of weird coming back to do this, so it's awesome. So I am housed out of the Millis Police Station, so that's where a lot of people can get a hold of me if they need things. So this is something which all of you guys are familiar with, the Metro West Healthcare Foundation and the survey that they do every other year, just to see the trend data of what's happening with the kids and where are kind of those risk and protective factors, where are the gaps, where are the things that we need to address. And when I look at doing this, I've done this in many other districts and been in the beginning of this data when it was formatted with the Metro West Healthcare Foundation, and to see all that comes, from this data and what the schools do to really look at some of the risk factors and some of the gaps that we're seeing. So it's really great to look at when we look at that. So obviously the first slide is just kind of gives you an overview of the number of students that were given this survey from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade. And so when we look at it, the parents are given a passive consent, so they do allow for, if you don't want them to do the survey, then they can opt out of it and things like that. This was the first year that they did it on the computer. So it's very interesting as I talked to a few of the different kids, just in the different districts and things like that about the transition from computer to paper. Even though it's an anonymous survey, some of them did have some apprehension about the IP address, and when we look at the results overall, they are very similar to Metro West region as well as like Massachusetts. So even though there was that kind of like, they're gonna know if I answered it this way, it still came out valid. So that is the first thing, just kind of to show you. And just like we've been doing this since 2006, so the data is, we have a lot of trend data.
What was our response? If you don't have this, it's fine, but what was the response rate the last time we did this? Was it 83 and 88? Was it comparable?
It was very comparable, just the difference of the number of students based on the population at that time.
But the
it was
percentages
comparable.
was comparable, okay.
Yeah, it was. So the first thing that they looked at was, we're gonna go over the substance abuse. So the first thing that we looked at was the middle school substance abuse. So obviously everybody is talking about, the vaping and all of that, as we've heard that that's like a big issue. So when we look over, I pulled some of the stats that were the most prominent that I had seen, but when we look at like the 2021, we have, the vaping was a lot higher. So this is where we kind of look at, are there some differences in, lifetime use, and did they answer it differently based on the IP address? When I've looked at the data myself over the districts, I have seen that there was a big shift in a decrease in the substance abuse than what we actually see is going on. So that if there was one area that I'm like, I don't know if it's as valid, I would say that it was the substance abuse area. Because we know that vaping is a big issue, and to have 4.4% of Millis middle school students saying that they've used it in their lifetime seems a little bit low to me. I hope I'm not wrong, but it just did, jump out to me like that. And the marijuana use, inhalant use, and obviously the alcohol. So then we can go on to the high school. So when we look at the high school, when we look at the lifetime in 2021, just to give you an example, the lifetime had increased from 16% in 9th grade. So when looking at the grades, because they also break it down by grade, what's happening per grade, how are we seeing that increase? So for lifetime, it was like 16% of the kids were vaping in 9th grade, and then it jumped to 52% in 12th grade. So that was last year, the previous, the stats that we did. So it really looked that the current use is also increasing from 5% to 34% from the 2020 survey or 2019 to now. So we are seeing that increase in the vaping from the current use. For alcohol use, when we look at like the trend of what's happened, it has decreased substantially, so over the lifetime. So when they look at 2016, 2018, it did decrease from 70% to 60%, and now it's at 50%. So that's something to kind of look at too, is that there's that decrease. It was very interesting. They also look at like the distracted driving and kind of like driving in a car with somebody who's drinking. And that has decreased for the students, but what's really interesting is when you look at, there's a question, have you ever driven with an adult that's been, who's been drinking? And the numbers are always, that's the one that always stands out to me personally, because that means that it's a caregiver or somebody that's driving. So they do ask those types of questions as well. Marijuana, obviously from 2018, it looks like it, decreased substantially, which was kind of interesting to me, just with the trend of, marijuana distribution places and all of that. It looks like it went from, 32% to 22%. That 10% does seem pretty large, but, and then obviously the prescription drugs, I think there's been a lot of, public information about prescription drugs and heroin and, overdosing and things like that. And so that has decreased. One of the things that's been interesting is I've spent a lot of my career doing a lot with the opioid epidemic and setting up systems. And when I had first started, we were doing, there was all the campaign about teaching the parents to keep the medicine out of their medicine cabinets. And so that hasn't been really, like, the awareness of that hasn't been brought back for many years. And so now when you talk to a lot of kids, when they are using prescription drugs, whatever that may be, they're in the medicine cabinet. That's where they're getting it. So we have the opioid task force here in Millis that we started with the opioid abatement money. And so looking at how do we do some more awareness about where you're keeping those prescriptions. If you have prescriptions that aren't being used, dropping them off at the police station, in the drug box, just to sabotage to just saturate the environment to get that message out again. Because we are seeing that a lot of pills are some of the things that are being used. So we can go to the next one. So obviously the additional, these are just kind of some additional things that we had talked about that we looked at. And this was very interesting to me, as we always look at, from a perspective of being the town social worker, what is it that we need to do what is happening in the households, for everybody. And so you're looking at what is that, what's the perceived risk that these kids are having when it comes to substance use. And so obviously, it was great to see that 97% of the middle school students, perceived that people who are using vaping is doing some physical harm, to them. And this was interesting where, the other ones about the middle school students, where 23% of the students have lived with someone who has a problem with drugs or alcohol. And then 94 said that, looking at stated that people their age who use marijuana several times are more likely to become addicted. So, they're learning some of these things, and at least they're, we always wonder, what do we teach them that they're actually like setting in, and at least we're talking about those harms and they're learning that, so that's good. One of the biggest things I think when we discuss, the strategies of what's happening with substance abuse, what are we doing? So now we have all this data, what is the school actually doing to deal with this? And so we sat down with the guidance counselors, adjustment counselors, and administration to kind of figure out, like, what is everybody doing in the school? So we have, school-wide presentations. The high school has the I Decide program through Mass General, right? Through Mass General. They have the diversion program for kids that got caught doing, drugs or alcohol or things like that. Topics are covered in the health classes. There's obviously the resources through the Millis Police with Officer Bickford. The other thing is like they have these cards, and so all the kids have like these QR cards. It's like through the Millis Care, so they can scan it and they can get resources, whether it's to like a substance abuse hotline or it's like suicide or anything. So all the kids have these, just as kind of giving that other intervention if they didn't want to say something. Some of the kids have done podcasts. I know that I had been asked to do one of those senior projects. So I have a student that had talked to me about opioid abuse and kind of educating other students on that. So we did some of that.
Bless you.
Bless you. And also the wellness. So there's a lot of different things. They did buy the vaping detection machines. I don't think they've arrived yet, right? But they have been ordered to be in the bathroom. So there's a lot that's going on in regards to addressing that issue. And this is also in regards to the impaired driving. So this kind of exactly what I had been talking about, just like those recent trends, that, they're riding in a car driven by a student, high school student who's been drinking, decreased from 12% in 2001, to 4%, and then now it's at 3%. So at least they're starting to see, they're acknowledging that. The texting while driving, was higher in 2021 than it was in 2018. But now it's dropped a little bit, where it's decreased to 35%, or to 27%. So that's a good thing. We're seeing that decrease. And there's many different things that they'll do. They have like the distracted driving. And so the next slide kind of shows what the school's doing in regards to those things, where they have like a presentation. It's like end distracted driving. The Norfolk DA has like a simulated machine that comes in so that they can work on, see what it's actually like. Some SAT events, looking at substance abuse in the laws, like what's going to happen. They'll do that in the classrooms, talking about that. So just to kind of give them an overview of what would happen if, you were drinking, driving, or texting, or whatever that may be. So that's helpful. So the next thing that they go on is violence. But before I get to, does anybody have questions about the substance abuse and the distracted driving? Because I know it's a lot of information. So obviously, go
Mr.
ahead.
Conrad.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not. You had mentioned how alcohol seemed to be going down. Some of that might be people changing because of IP addresses, but was it shifting somewhere else? It sounded like just about every, or is it going somewhere else?
It didn't look like it according to the data, but according to what the kids are saying, it didn't look like it was shifting someplace else, but I also wonder if that's really true. I'm just being completely honest with you.
Yeah.
I see, and I do a lot of work in substance abuse, so I do see that alcohol, is, kids are still drinking. And they're not just socially drinking, they're drinking to get drunk. There's a reason that they want to drink. I do see that pills are a really big problem. And I think that, what we've seen through the pandemic is that Adderall was something that became, people were working from home, they couldn't concentrate. I mean, there was a lot going on, we all know that. So Adderall became something that was prescribed all the time to help people concentrate, adults, and now the kids are, the parents don't need it, they're back at work, it's in the medicine cabinet, kids are just taking it. And so you're seeing that increase of prescription drugs being used, not as like an opioid, but something like that. That's in my experience, that's what I'm seeing. The data didn't actually show that. So that's why, from my experience, I feel that there's a big need to start to push that, push that education for parents about, what could happen. And, when you look at it, there's so much going on with like pressed pills. And, people are buying what they think is a Xanax and there's something in it, and they have these fentanyl, testing strips that now you can get and they're free, and you can crush up that pill and you can use the strip, but the other half of the pill that you didn't crush up and snort right now may have more fentanyl in it than this part that you did. So now their perception of what could happen, I mean, they could die and they don't even know that. It's just, there's so much that happens that like kids just aren't even aware of that goes into this, and they think like, oh, I got a Xanax and it really wasn't, and they look so similar, like you would have no idea that it was a difference. So, to answer your question, the long and the short is that we're not seeing it in the data, but I do think that there needs to be more education around that.
Should there be
I met with the Metro West Healthcare Foundation and did discuss it because I had frequent kids, like a bunch of kids who had talked about the IP address. It was like the same thing. And I did say, aren't you seeing this? Like, I get it that everybody, that it's easier this way, but I don't know if those are right. I mean, I'm on the front line of substance abuse, and I don't know if they're correct. Data's data, but I just am saying my opinion, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I have young kids, and I hope that I'm wrong, so, but, it's just what you see. But that's a good question. So obviously the violence, which we all kind of look at that, and one of the things, when we were doing the data and really talking about it was like, what is considered for a middle school kid, what is considered a physical fight? And so that's the question. I went back and looked at like the survey itself, and it doesn't actually say what a physical fight is. So it talks about like their lifetime. Is it that somebody like, hit them or like, not like punched them and got into a fight? So, when they say that, these kids are getting into physical fights in the last 12 months or they're getting in fights on the school property, what does that mean? So that is one question that I did bring up to the Metro West Healthcare Foundation, is that like that is such a broad term, and what is that? When it comes to like the weapons as well, that was another thing. Like we know that there's Boy Scouts and they have, they go fishing and they do hunting and they do all of these things. So when we're asking them about, what is considered that weapon, obviously they say in it like a gun, knife, or club, but we don't know, like that they brought to school. What was
Why
that?
wouldn't they ask, are you carrying a gun, knife, or club for self-protection?
Right. It's
Because
the
if
way
you're a
forward.
Boy Scout or you're a fisherman and you have a tackle box in your truck or your car, you're carrying a knife. Or you may have it in your pocket, but you're fishing after school. There's ways to ask that question.
Exactly. And that was one of the questions, that was kind of like the way that they worded it. I was like, okay, that's,
And I would say on the physical fighting, I wouldn't want to be overly technical, but I think in that case, because an assault and battery is defined as an unwanted touching by
Right.
someone. There's ways to word that where, because a fight could be yelling, and that's not a criminal law violation or violence. It's disruptive to school, violates rules, but they could do better if they're not asking the right questions, especially when you drill down on that, they really should be.
I agree. I mean, and that's kind of what we had talked about at the meeting, that it just is a little bit of a broad term when it could be, a little bit more concise. Especially when you're looking at the safety of you're looking at how the kids feel safe in school. You want to know what's actually happening when they ask these questions. So that is something that, we did talk about. It was very interesting, the next one, this is a new question that was asked about the experience of violence in the home. And so that was, 21%, had during their lifetime that they had been hit, beat, kicked, or physically hurt by an adult. That's the way that they asked the question. Have you ever done that? So we don't, like obviously 21% answered, 21.5 answered yes, but we don't know the consequent, the situation of that and what does that really mean. And then obviously, looking at the domestic violence within the homes, the next part of that question is, has anybody, in the home slapped, kicked, punched, or beat up each other? So is that brother, sister, is that?
And if you're going back to them, I would add strangulation, because a domestic violence situation where, and it's primarily a man strangles a woman, there's an 800% increase of that woman being killed in a domestic violence because of that strangulation. So they've even 4 years ago, they updated Mass General laws to actually pull out strangulation as a heightened crime. They pulled it out of just the
general.
bucket of domestic
Yeah.
violence.
So
Not
I
that
definitely.
I
will
mean,
bring
not that you
back.
could do anything, but I mean, if you're going to ask, if you're going that deep, they should be asking and adding strangulation.
Yeah, I'll definitely bring it back to them because
They'll probably won't want to go
they
that
might
far.
not, but you know what? It's kind of putting that bug in the air, and if somebody else says it, then maybe they listen. Maybe it's not in 2 years they do it, but maybe it's later. I mean, I think that that's the whole thing, is that the only way that they're going to change the survey is to get feedback from people. So I appreciate that. So that was the middle school, and then the next one is the high school. So the reports of fighting in the past 12 months have obviously decreased from 25% in 2016, then it went to 14% in 2018, and then declined to 6% in 2021. So that's really good. The overall weapons, reports of weapon carrying in the past 30 days decreased from 7% in 2018 to 3% in 2021. And then there's once again the stats on the experience of violence in the home. And the numbers are pretty similar in regards to high school and middle school. We're looking at around 20% and about the 8.89%. So that is something, to look at and just kind of like look at the trend of what are we seeing and what's happening in the homes. And so this is the one, the key things on bullying, which, that's always, we have so many things in the, in the school system dealing with cyberbullying and bullying, and, all the different systems that have happened. So in this survey, when you're looking at the middle school survey, the bullying is actually defined so that so the kids can read it. So it says that it's defined for the students as one or more times another student teases, threatens, or spread rumors about them, hits, shoves, or hurts another student over and over. So it does give them that definition before they answer the question. So the school bullying, being a victim of it in 2021 was 14%, and then it's now lower. I mean, it was substantially lower than in 2018. It was 21%. So we have seen that decrease with, the things that are happening. But it also, you need to take into account, they were also in COVID. So there was also that time that in-school victimization couldn't happen. Where we did see that increase was in the cyberbullying, because obviously they were all on the computers, they were with their cell phones. So we saw that in 2016, it was 16%, and then in 2021, it was 20%. So it did go up, and we know that, that was kind of the trend. All they had was their phones at that time. So that is something. And then we have the high school, which I think the bullying they kept the same definition for that. And so that was, bullying 17% of the high school in the past 12 months. And one of the things they added, how many have reported bullying other people, which I thought was really good, kind of accepting that responsibility. 5% said that they did, but at least they're asking that question.
Do they ask whether the victims of bullying reported to school officials or
So
another adult?
It does go into that, yeah. So there is data that says that they reported it to either somebody outside of the school or they reported it to somebody in the school. So it does break it down to who
Are we
they
seeing
did.
increases in reporting?
I think that we did. I can look deeper into that, but they did ask that. But I
they
can
do
get
that?
that
Okay.
information for you for sure. And then obviously the cyberbullying. So it was interesting when I looked at the next slide, if you want to go to, sorry about that. The next one was really looking at what are the kids being bullied about, which I think was very interesting, because we want to know, like, what are they actually saying? What is that internal stuff that the kids are struggling with in regards to, because we all know, we remember those things that somebody said to us when we were like 12, so we remember that. So what are these kids being bullied about? And so when they talked about it, once again, they, said, calling names, teased, made fun of, embarrassed, or threatened by others at school. They kind of defined that a little bit for them. And then they also asked, if they were, when it came to like that cyberbullying, they defined that as, being bullied or called names, teased, threatened, gossiped about by someone using the internet, social media, cell phones, or electronic device. So it did spell that out a little bit for them, but really looking at it, broke it down, like what it was, and it comes down to height, weight, and how they look. That's what the kids were saying was the biggest thing that they were being bullied about. And that was both in 7th grade, and even when you go to the statistics on the high school, it was the same thing. It was all
That makes me
about.
sad.
I know.
That really does. My God.
And
No, bullying, let me be clear. I don't think certain bullying is better than others, but that's just harsh. Really harsh.
you know. So I mean, and you see, I mean, we've seen that trend since COVID and even before, but on eating disorders and, you know, different, you know, we've seen a huge increase. You know, I have a practice in Milford, and the number of kids that are coming out of like an eating disorder clinic or are going in or struggling is astronomical. So I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand with what's going on.
It starts them on a pathway of self-esteem and self-hate. It's just,
And you know, and when you look at it, goes to the substance abuse. You know, like it looks like substance abuse is a solution to an underlying problem. Was this the underlying problem that they had the self-esteem, or they, you know, those types of things. So you look at it from that big perspective of all the different things that are going on. So it's sad, you know, that this is what being a kid is hard enough. You know, like it's difficult. So the next thing is kind of what is the school doing about all of these things, which, you know, you all know that there's a lot that they're doing anyways. You know, health curriculum, they have some grants, you know, violence relationship grants looking at that. You know, the dating relationships, it did go into, you know, when in the data, it did talk about like dating violence too. You know, what is happening? Are you forced to do something that you didn't? You know, are you being, you know, possessiveness and things like that. So it did go into that as well. You know, there's obviously the gaggle alerts or the electric alerts if people are searching for things or doing things on the computers. One of the JED goals that the school has is obviously to kind of develop their bullying curriculum to see what that, you know, to kind of fine tune that. They have their peer leaders. The MARC lessons are that's the Massachusetts Aggression Center, so they have a lot of lessons that they do in the advisory periods. So, and obviously the school-wide and district-wide policies. So, yeah, so that's that. So the mental health is one of the things that we all know, you know, is something that is really increased. And, you know, I think we see it all over. It's not just in Millis, it's in every town and every school. You know, that there's just such a need for emotional support. And, you know, now that COVID is over, I think that, you know, people want to be back in person. They want counseling in person, and the demand and the lack of counselors it's just not meeting in the middle. It's very hard. But we're looking at, you know, what is happening and what can we do to help these kids, maybe in a group setting, or is it in a school? Is it something after school? What can we do for these kids so that they can get that support, as well as for the parents? Because, you know, as a parent, I know that when my kid is suffering, even though I'm a therapist and been doing it forever, I don't have the answers. I don't know what to do. And as a parent, we need that support too. So one of the benefits of this position as a social worker is being able to call that parent when they know that, like, you know, something's happened, their kid's struggling, and there's a well-being check or something, and being able to just say, like, how are you doing? You know, just being just being a person and just being genuine and caring, because there's many times that, you know, as a parent, we don't look out for ourselves. We're always taking care of our kids, and nobody stops to say, how are you? And, you know, so I think that that's been one of the biggest rewards from this position as a social worker in the town, is being able to know that, like, I have the opportunity to tell somebody, to ask somebody if they're okay. And even with the staff too, you know, like when it comes to like different things with students, things that are going on, you know, being able to just call them and just being human, like, all right, I know today was a hard day, you know, whether it's a principal or whoever it is, like, I know it was a hard day, like, how are you doing with that? And, you know, I think that sometimes we just get so rushed in the middle of things and are in the trenches that we don't get to do that. So, the mental health stuff is one that, you know, I think it hurts a lot of us, because sometimes we feel like there's not much we can do. So obviously here's, you know, after, you know, there was a lot of, you know, overall the kids are stressed. I mean, and that's what's happening. You know, we're looking at, you know, 34, it varied in like 2016 to like 34 to 37%, and now, you know, 36%, you know, we're looking at, they're stressed out. The mental health issues, obviously, like the depressive symptoms increased, and the one thing, you know, the self-injury definitely increased as well. We look at, you know, the percentages that, you know, the ones that alarm us is like the the ones that, you know, the 18.6% of middle school kids that seriously considered suicide in the past 12 months. You know, that's pretty scary.
How do they define that? Do they say
And so-
taking steps, gathering, getting a weapon? What do they?
So it said that they had seriously considered, so it was first, did they harm themselves? Then it was, did they seriously consider? And then it was like, in your lifetime or in the past 12 months?
So it's either you got a rope, you found the pills, you got a knife, and you either tried to do something
Right.
or you seriously considered.
You see, right. And then there's also one that you did something and it needed medical attention. So that was, you know, it's just concerning, you know, that is, you know, when you look at all of this over the big, you know, picture, it's like, okay, how do we give these kids these resiliency skills? And that's why, you know, this SEL in schools, we're teaching the kids when they're in kindergarten how to say no, how to, you know, express themselves, you know, how to just be their own people is going to help them when they get older, you know, because they're going to have those resiliency skills to say, I need help, or, you know, whatever it may be. So it is so important because it's just so difficult. You know, when talked about the coping strategies for the middle school, because obviously we want to talk about that, and we know that through the curriculums, you know, they've been taught coping strategies with the yoga classes and things. So, you know, what are they, you know, how are they coping? What are they doing to distract themselves? Obviously, their coping strategy is distracting, and they say, you know, it's by watching TV, getting on my phone, you know, doing something, or going to sleep. You know, so it's kind of teaching them what are some other strategies that they could use to cope besides just that distraction. Because distraction may work right now, but long term, you know, they need to find other things as well. Obviously, you know, it was nice to see that at least 32% of them are exercising to make themselves feel better, so that's great. You know, and looking at them, you know, it broke it down to what are the symptoms that they're feeling. So are they tired? Do they have little energy? You know, so really looking at it, because we look at, you know, and I think we've seen so much that the word depression or anxiety is used all the time. And so is it, you know, one of the other things is it situational that you're sad? Something happened and made you sad. You may not be clinically depressed, but you're sad. And that's okay. So it's, you know, it's kind of getting them to understand all of that as well. And they're middle school, and it's kind of a trend, and they see it on social media and all these different things. So, you know, that's kind of, so looking at that for the middle school. And then the next one for the high school, obviously looking at, you know, their same things about, you know, we did break it down when we were talking as a group. There was some questions about what's the difference between the males and the females, you know, when it comes to the depressive symptoms in the past 12 months, when it comes to that self-injury, where are we seeing that? So in this data, it does, on this slide, it does break it down into the male and female. So we did see, you know, obviously some increase, and it's interesting that the kids are recognizing that their mental health is worse now than the beginning of COVID. So they know that isolation caused them to have more anxiety, being home, being on the internet, things like that. It's interesting too is that we talked about, you know, where that conversation about, you know, how they look and how they dress, and that's one of the bullying things, that the trend that we're seeing in many different places, that, you know, the kids when they were in COVID, they just rolled out of bed and they were in their sweats, and I mean, we all were too, you know, but we had our shirts on for Zoom, but, you know, now they're kind of doing the same thing coming to school like that too. So, you know, it's like that trend hasn't really stopped. You know, they're in their PJs or comfy clothes, you know.
Were you at the basketball game earlier? They don't
that
wear
what it was?
clothes.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm being very judgy here, and I shouldn't. But they wear pajamas.
Right.
Have you been a Roach Brothers at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Well, that seems reasonable. It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
But you see,
And their hair's all like this. I'm being very judgmental, sorry.
but I think that's one of the things that we've seen.
I'm not bullying anyone
No.
at the game. I'm keeping to myself in the corner, not talking to anyone.
But, you know, you see where that kind of like you're still rolling out of bed and
Yes.
coming to school, you know, and, you know, so not that you have to dress like you're going to a private school, but, you know, it's just kind of the things that we've seen, and then you look at it in the big picture of like the trends of, you know, I don't know.
There's probably a
Kind of
fine line between being trendy sloppy and being sloppy. Like, who knows? We're probably not in a position to
Right.
judge
Right.
what is right and wrong.
Just being the observers of the big
Yes,
picture. That's
exactly.
it. So.
Trying to fix it right here.
We're trying to figure it out, you know, like where are the things that we can look at? What's changed, you know?
Right.
And I think does it just come down to that, you know, like, and then kind of just looking, you know, the kids in the high school, they still coped by distracting, doing the same exact thing, you know, with the phones and, you know, really so that they can distract themselves from their worries, you know. You did see kind of that, you know, trend that they're nervous about school issues, their physical appearance, and their emotional health, where they can actually identify that I am getting stressed out or worried about my physical appearance and my emotional health, where, you know, maybe a while ago they wouldn't have even thought about that, you know, like that emotional health might not have even been a factor that they would have been thinking about. So at least we're starting to see that. I thought it was very interesting in the high school. They did ask that question, and it was one of the hires things of how do you cope with it, where they make jokes about their emotions or their situation that they're feeling stressed or anxious about, you know, so they're making a joke about it to make themselves feel better or not to, you know, make it seem as bad as maybe it is
Or maybe judging how others react to
Yeah.
the joke.
you know, so that was interesting, and I was kind of like, oh, that was a good question, you know, to ask that. So that was interesting. And it is something that now it kind of made me think. I'm like, oh, I'm going to ask people that. Like, you know, people that I see, like, do you make jokes about what's happening to you? So, yeah. So when it comes to, obviously, the strategies that they're coming to address mental health, I know this slide is very small, but there is so much that the school district is doing and the teachers are doing and, you know, all of the schools. There's so many things. And I think that you guys know all of that, you know, just like their different flex blocks, the senior projects. I mean, I could go on and on. Obviously, the increase in the staffing with the adjustment counselors, you know, that are now 2 full-time. You know, the middle school, they have the self program, the bridge program. I mean, there's a lot. Even, you know, talking about the QPR, that everybody was, you know, trained in that. And that's kind of like when somebody starts to talk about suicide, it's kind of how do you get them to talk, you know, to find out if they're really suicidal or depressed or what are they doing. So everybody being trained in that is a huge thing. So that's, you know, they have the town nurse as a social support, you know, obviously me. And so when I come in, I'll do like some different consults on, you know, what are resources, or if there's families that need resources for counseling or, you know, anything like that, you know, the staff knows that they can reach out to me and that I can try to help get those resources. If it's a inpatient program, if it's, you know, whatever it may be, just trying to help with that support. So there's a lot that goes on in regards to mental health. So obviously, we talked about, they did ask some questions about, you know, sexual intercourse and condom use, and just kind of, you know, looking at that trend, kind of what's happening. We did talk about so one of the things was like the lifetime sexual intercourse, and that decreased from 2018, it was 26%, and then in 2021, it's 17%. So I wasn't really sure when we were doing this. I know at the high school they're talking about this, but I just wasn't sure at the middle school if they were talking about it. So that was just something that we kind of brought up as one of the topics that they talk about. Okay, so we can go to the next one. So the next one has to do with their physical activity and their body weight. And so, you know, the proportion of youth that are engaging in that moderate to vigorous physical activity hasn't really changed, you know, substantially in different surveys. So, you know, it's staying around that 50%, you know, 52% in 2018 and then 54. So it's staying pretty consistent. The obesity, overweight and obesity, that's kind of stayed the same, and that's their perceived, you know, so we do need to kind of think about that too. The other thing is like the proportion of you sleeping 8 hours or more on an average school night was lower now than it was in 2018. Which kind of makes sense, because if they're answering that coming off of COVID, you know, maybe they were staying up all night and had to get up. I mean, we don't know. It was all crazy. You know, but that's interesting. And then obviously the sports in the middle school, and then in the high school. So yeah, so that just kinda goes on. Now it goes into the online behaviors. So there's surveys a lot. Imagine this is the whole book. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we know that during COVID, the kids spent a lot of time on social media. I mean, I don't think I really need to explain that to all of you. You know, and not all of it was on schoolwork or anything like that. You know, they were on the phones. You know, they seem to have found similar people who had interests in what they were interested in, and, you know, that's just something, obviously it rose. So in 2018 when they did it, it was like 3 or more hours spent online, or screen time on an average day was 52%, now it was up to 65%. I mean, I think we expected that to happen when we were doing it. So, and then the high school, pretty much, you know, we saw the same thing, you know, where they're spending more time on social media and spending, you know, 3 or more hours online on an average day. So there's that. And then my favorite part of doing these stats is always looking at the protective factors, because that's what I think, you know, is really showing, like, how do these kids feel? What are we doing? And so I think that these stats really, you know, looking at, you know, the several indicators of the school connectedness, you know, obviously are lower in 2018 compared to 2021, which is related to that pandemic and the, you know, obviously remote learning. So many of the kids report that they have a friend to talk to about personal problems. That decreased. So in 2018, it was 73%, and now it's down to 64%, which maybe that was based on, you know, COVID and not being with them. So the other one, you know, is kind of looking at the adult support, like that decreased a little bit from 2018 by 7% to 2021, but that also could be related to the COVID too. So I think that we just, you know, the numbers that we have overall are still really good, but there was a slight decrease, but we have to take into perspective what that was all about. Okay, and so then in the high school, it's just a little bit, you know, similar. You know, when looking at that, there's so many different, you know, like you talk about like the mentoring program through the JED Foundation. You know, you have so many different things that the school's doing to bring that connectedness. I mean, we heard it just a little while ago of all the things that they're doing to really connect the students back to learning and back to the adults. So there's no question that those small numbers are going to increase based on the teachers and the faculty that you have, no matter what. So yeah, there's a lot of data. I mean, obviously, you know, we look at this and we use this to kind of drive the different things that we're doing, you know, not only in the school system, but also across the town. Like, where are things that we need, where are the gaps, and what do we need to address? So, you know, we're going to use this for local strategies. We're going to try to, you know, have the focus for the student wellness and for the community and the families, really, you know, because we're all in this together. I mean, your slogan, small school, big family. I mean, that's exactly what this is. So, I don't know. It's a lot of information I just threw at you, but if you have questions.
So, I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
So, how many social workers should a town of this size, seeing what you're seeing in the last 7 months, how many should we have?
So there's me, that's here. So I'm here only 20 hours a week. I could be here full time.
Okay, if you were here full-time, would there be a need for another 20-hour person? Or do you think a town of this size, based on what you've seen in just the 7 months, could this be managed with the 40-hour position?
It could, but I don't think that it could be I don't believe that it should be like a 9 to 5 schedule. I think it needs to be like some evenings too. Like, I think it needs to be flexible.
So could I'm asking you very loaded questions, and if you
That's okay.
if you don't want it, I'm directing them to the bigger audience, not just you. So if there was someone, if it was a 1.5 FTE, so you guys could
Flexibility that
Yeah.
you could shift.
you could shift your
I'm
time.
available this night, somebody else
But
100%.
just as important, some could be doing casework and others could be doing education and
100%.
training. So, because your priority, and I'm speaking, and if I'm wrong, is probably if you're dealing with a crisis, you can't go do that training or go do that class. You're canceling to do the crisis.
Or do the case management.
The case management, I'm using you're doing the case management work.
Or
You
I can't even do the case management work because I'm doing the crisis.
Okay, so you have crisis, case management, and then when you have what little free time,
Right.
you'd like to do training. So potentially we could make not just the school, but the town, could make inroads on some of these other issues
Yeah.
if we had more capacity and
100%.
resources.
Totally agree with that.
So another question for you, and you may not have the answer for this. What percentage, you may have a gut feeling, what percentage of the problems at home are impacting the student and impacting their school? Meaning, it's not a school issue, it's a home issue manifesting itself through behaviors in the school, discipline, academics, substance abuse, bullying. What's your gut on that? What is your,
100%.
you think it's the home impacting the school?
Okay, we'll say 90.
Okay.
I would say 90%. And that's based on my many years of experience with not just in this town, but in general.
That's not Millis specific.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just In general.
In general. Yeah.
I also think, and this is not necessarily generated directly at you, I also think that the town has done a good job to not say, we're a small town, everything's right. Because that's a mistake. Because we're no different. Everything is to
100.
scale, everything is relative. And I'm glad that the town has finally kind of come to the conclusion that we're no different than anyone else, and we're hiding behind a facade that everything's perfect in Little Millis, and it's not.
Well, and I think with all of the construction that's about to happen in Millis over, the long term, with all these new apartment buildings in Section 8, I really feel like that 1.5 person is going to be needed. That increase of, population is going to bring a lot of stuff. And I feel like I wouldn't be able to do it all in 20 hours. No.
I mean, everything's to scale, but you had, on the self-harm, you had 20% in the middle school, 20% in the high school. But man, that's 45 kids in the high school.
Yeah.
45
Yeah.
kids in each school, which
Yeah.
is literally 90 kids in this building.
Are thinking of, seriously thinking
Right.
of suicide.
That's not
It's a huge
insignificant
number.
at all.
It's a huge number.
You have 1 to 2%, that's 3 kids, 4 kids,
Right.
who are taking their lives or making an effort to take their own lives.
And that's just the ones
Yeah,
that
who
were
are
willing
right,
to actually put it down on a form and admit.
right.
I think your position and what you do is vitally important.
Thank you.
We don't have enough. We're probably not, every town is probably saying, but I think that towns are starting to do the right thing and trying to not insulate themselves and say there's a town issue and there's a school issue. It is. It is completely blended, and what you're saying, based on your 90 to 10 that I forced you to make, the stuff at home is impacting the kids, and it's impacting their ability to learn and to grow and mature and prepare.
And I think that's what you've seen with that social and emotional learning is that there's so much, they can't learn if they're not emotionally well. And so is that stemming from home or is it something that's genetic or biological? I mean, who knows, whatever's going on, but there's a lot, and so I think educating, I think that presentation that's going to happen,
Next week.
to the teens and tweens is unbelievable. I just hope people go.
Right.
That's what happens all the time, and you never know, I was talking with the rec department about being able to do, one-day events or presentations for different things, but is it better to do it in person, or is it better to do it on Zoom? Which one are you gonna, do you do it in both? I don't know anymore, but all you want is for people to attend, so do you do it, where you say, okay, you get a free homework pass if your parents watch this, and they print out a certificate. Is that what you need to do to get the message out there? Because
Yeah.
parents might not watch it. Or do you do, like there's just so many different things. One of the officers was offering a self-defense class for females through the rec department. And, that was awesome. I mean, that's something that people should know, and the girls, and it was all about different self-esteem and all of this, and she didn't have a lot of people sign up. So it's like, you just hope that, okay, can we do something for the seniors before they go back to school? Like we did in another town, we did like the RAD, we did a self-defense for during senior week or whatever, or if it was instead of a health final or something, the seniors got to take part in a self-defense class or just awareness in general of when you go to college, like how do you walk in a parking garage? What do you need to be aware of? Like these things that in this little town of Millis, they're not learning. So we need to teach them that before they go away so that they can protect themselves. So it's like those little things, how do we get that message to these kids? But I
Well,
don't
thank
know.
you for everything that you do. Any
Yeah,
other questions of the
absolutely.
committee?
No,
Sorry, I
just a
like, had
huge
a
thank
million
you.
ideas and so
No,
many different things.
it's really
This is very-
excellent.
very
Yeah,
helpful.
it's really.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know, and I'm going to pass on the information, the questions, and, if you do, I can look deeper into it. If you sit back and you're thinking tonight, because I know that's what happens sometimes, and you're like, I wonder about this, just let me know, and you can let,
Is there any need for you to come back at any other point? You have limited time, so we don't want to take your time. But other than the survey, is there any other point where you think you should be coming to kind of give us an update, or is that enough?
I mean, I think that it's always beneficial for you guys to know, like, what we're really seeing and what I'm really doing. I can go to the Board of Selectmen and, do that, but I think sometimes to get that message across to the community is being able to come to forums like this, because you guys are going to spread that message like, oh, we saw the social worker today, and did you know that this is going on? And I feel like that's how it gets passed along and people know. I mean, even going to the senior center and talking to, some of the people, and then 2 days later I get a call from somebody I don't even know, but they had been talking to somebody and they need, I think that's how this gets out. So yeah,
You're welcome to come back anytime.
Thanks. Thanks. Or
Thank
I'll just
you
come
so
back
much.
with ideas, who knows?
And we'll have questions.
Perfect. I love it. I love the challenge.
Right.
All right, thank
Goodbye.
you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All of you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
And I would like to put it on the 25th,
Yeah.
in the auditorium. John Madeline is speaking, he's phenomenal. For all parents in the district, family caregivers, if you can come out to that, please do.
Thank you. Let's go back to the chair report. Let's do the MSBA project update first, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Gibbons to give a little update, but we have a school building committee meeting tomorrow night on Zoom, 7
O'clock.
or 7:30?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. One thing that did come back from the state today was our enrollment certification, and they set our enrollment at, hold on, I have the numbers.
6. Bob put it in his memo.
Yeah, I have the letter, 6:20,
I think it was 6:45.
6:45? Sorry, I should have. I'm going to go to Bob's memo. It's clear in Bob's, nope, that's not Bob's memo.
6:45 down the bottom here.
6:25?
6:45.
6:45, which is, how much is this, Bob? They originally had us at 581, and then we presented to them, actually, I was unable to attend the meeting. I think Ms. Gibbons missed the meeting as well. But we presented housing starts, projections, the NESDEC enrollment study, and it went up to 645, which is important because that is the key number. Any project is based on that number because they base square footage on that number. They base cost on square footage, so it's all tied to the enrollment.
And that's a combined middle school, high school enrollment?
That's 6 to
Correct.
6 to
Yeah.
12, yes,
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
So we're at 645. So it's what, roughly 100 and 105, 106 kids per grade. So, and I know some grades are less, but we see a little surge coming. So
Right, we're
it's-
kind of in a trough.
Yeah, we're in a
coming
trough,
out of a
but that's-
trough.
right.
Yeah.
Right now, we're at 584.
Right.
So
Right, and it's somewhat rare for them to increase the number. So really, thank you to the town and
Provide a lot of
absolutely
information
for
on the,
all the permits and providing all that information about new builds and all of that. In addition to what Mr. Catalano had said about the NASDAQ report, the town was crucial in helping support getting that number increased.
And then the other piece that will be discussed tomorrow at the school building meeting is I don't know if it's considered a bid, but putting out a request for proposals for an owner projects manager, which is the next key. You hire and engage, which is required by statute, the OPM, and then the OPM starts the feasibility study and brings in all of these other specialties, subject matter experts, to map things out, to do HVAC, to do site work, or to do projections for everything. So that's the next step in the process. Is that I said I was going to turn it over to you, but is that?
No,
is that
no, that's
about
good.
right?
I will correct myself. Mr. Mulaney is correct. 7:30 tomorrow night. Thank you, Mr. Mulaney. For school building committee meeting start. I thought it was at 7, but it's 7:30.
I may come early. I'll start at 7.
7:30 start.
Anything else on the school building?
I think we've hit all of the deadlines in the
Yeah.
eligibility period. So
Oh, and you guys also
Yeah,
submitted.
capital planning and maintenance.
Yes, the capital planning.
Was
and
submitted.
maintenance has
Yeah.
been submitted.
Yeah.
So we are
Yeah.
right on track.
Can't
Okay.
wait for the owner's project manager to come on board because then we get to have them
do what they're supposed to do.
Run.
And be the experts, right?
Yes.
I guess that's right.
Yes.
So next up, Mr. Wick. So I was unable to attend the first meeting of the year. I apologize for my absence. I believe there was a brief discussion about the tri-board meeting that was, it feels like it was 8 months ago. It was December the 12th or 13th, whenever it was, I think, the second week in December. And there was a very elaborate agenda that we actually got through. And one of the agenda items, really the only agenda item that was brought forward by us was the discussion about the dramatic increase in out-of-district sped tuitions at 14%. And the impact that that's going to have on our budget. And we have not come up with a direct number just yet, but it is north of $1 million. And we're not prepared at this point to pinpoint an exact number because we don't know what our enrollment will be. Obviously, over the next couple months, actually a few weeks, I should say, we're going to have to become as refined as possible with an asterisk when necessary. But as we sit here today and as we sat there in December, we have $1 million plus. What number did we use? 1.2 million at the meeting? 1.4? Sorry, I apologize. I could go through my bag and find my notes. I know it was over $1 million. So let's just say 1.4 million. And that was directly related to SPED. Nothing above and beyond in this building. That a level funded budget with the increase in the SPED tuitions and some SPED to enrollment, we're looking at a $1.4 million increase, which is well beyond our 4% agreed upon rise in budget. So another piece that is also coming up is that Ms. Underhill and myself have reached out to the local officials, Senator Roush and Representative DeRosa, Arena DeRosa, sorry, to have a conversation about this and to bring forward to them, and just based on the email traffic, the initial email traffic, it appears that our elected officials may not be aware of this dramatic increase in sped tuition. So I asked Terry to put together kind of a talking point memo that will calibrate the committee as well as prepare myself to go to a meeting and have a conversation. What I hope is the first of many conversations. I think the state has to understand the impact that's going on. So that's a big buildup, Terry, but if you want to take it over from here.
Yeah.
Please, I
And,
should say.
I'd like to say I have better news than what you provided, but I don't. But let's start with if we can, let's start with what is called the circuit breaker memo.
The circuit breaker and impact on
You all have a
FY24.
copy of it. But it really is more than that. It's kind of evolved into a special education memo. So just a couple of quick reminders to the committee. Circuit breaker is always in arrears. So hence problem number one. If your tuition or out-of-district tuition is increasing a great deal for the next fiscal year, that's great, except that the circuit breaker is going to be based on the previous year's out-of-district tuition. So it's not going to be a match.
And it's also never a one-to-one.
It's never a one-to-one. It is 75% of the amount over 4 times the average cost per pupil. And right now, that's around $56,000. So the first $56,000 this year will be a little bit more next year, okay? But what circuit breaker will be based on for this year's reimbursement? The first $56,000 is on the Millis Public Schools.
So what would be helpful if we go through this instead of trying to explain the detailed calculation?
Right.
Is if we can explain just the raw percentage of our circuit breaker increase or our tuition increase, that circuit breaker increase will cover, albeit 2 years from now. So if what we're going to get from the state is 25% of this increase, let's just determine what that is so that we can speak to it so that the public can understand. Our tuitions are going up $400,000. In 2 years, the state's going to give us an extra $56 grand. That
Correct.
and whatever.
And to be fair to Mr. Wigan, I asked him a bunch
no,
of
no,
questions. He's done exactly what I asked him to
and
do.
this is
But I agree
great,
with you.
but I'm just moving it to what
No,
we have
I
to
got you.
explain.
I get that. I just want to,
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
based on my
Yeah.
erratic questions, but
So-
you're right.
So in rough numbers, to answer your question, which I think is absolutely appropriate, we're looking right now at approximately a $569,000 increase just in out-of-district tuitions for next year. For circuit breaker, and this is based on the fact that in general, we receive about 30.5% of all tuition costs. So using that as just a statistical calculation. We would expect to receive, based on this year's tuitions, we'd expect to receive around $547,878. Now, you need to understand, we received $505,000 this year. So that's about a
Wait,
$42,000
if it's 35% of a 400.
30.5.
30.5%.
5%.
How does 30.5 of 569?
No,
Because
no.
that's just the expense. So
30.5%
our expenses are going up
overall
500.
tuitions.
Our expenses are going up 569,000, and the state's going to reimburse us about 35. The increase from the state's going to be about 35,000.
Yeah, well, 42,000.
42.
Yes.
But if, to your point, Mr. Conroy, if we're going to have the conversation, it really should be the out-of-district tuitions is this number plus the increase for the total.
Right.
Because if we're going to start using percentages and say on average it's 30.5, it's 30.5 of 569 is not averaging. It's what
Well,
the total.
Well, and again, maybe the better way to think about it is this way. Your out-of-district tuitions is going to go at $569,000. So, in round numbers,
Okay.
go ahead.
in a way, you're preparing this for me to prepare me for a meeting. So in case he can't go, I have to speak.
Okay.
So
In
dumb
round-
it down for me. No, this is what I want to say. What are we spending right now in FY '23?
Okay.
And then you add that increase of 569. What's the total out of district tuitions next year?
So and this is in round numbers now.
That's fine.
I have the detail for you.
Okay.
I will be able to provide you with the
Okay, do you
detail.
understand what I'm saying?
I do.
We could say $569,000 increase, but there's a missing number there.
Well, so this was what I was trying to say. So in round numbers right now, we're looking at total out-of-district tuitions next year of over $2.3 million.
Okay.
We are also looking at taking $500,000 from the circuit breaker fund, which means we would probably be dipping into current year revenues, if you will, to reduce that to basically $1.9 million.
Well, how much were we going to take out of circuit breaker?
500,000.
Okay.
So next year, you're going to spend $1.9 million, okay? What you're going to get next year, in all likelihood, is $547,000,
Based on last year's.
based on the previous year.
So 547 for circuit breaker. So really, we are looking at 1.4, right?
Right,
That's the 1.4.
pretty much. But that's not.
Takes a while. Takes a while to
That's-
get me there, Mark, but he does.
But again, and without getting into specifics, because we're still machinating over every line of the detailed budget, that's
I
not
understand.
your only special education increase.
Right.
And again, one of the things I need to say here, we're talking about it as special education. I would prefer to talk about it as federally mandated costs. These are not optional costs to the district.
When we talked at the tri-board, we were very clear that
Yeah.
these were mandates. These
Right.
are not optional.
Right.
This is not an optional program. While I can appreciate what you're saying, we do say that. That's
Okay.
not lost.
Okay.
Because what I don't want to do is we've talked about SPED for years, and now all of a sudden SPED is not in our lexicon, and all we're talking about is federal mandates. If you're encouraging us to say our SPED costs, which are federal mandates, are unfunded mandates, I don't have a problem with that.
I am encouraging that, and I would also indicate that, not tonight, but in meetings we have down the road, there are other federal mandates and state mandates that are also not nearly as large as this.
Sure.
But will have increases that we have to deal with.
I think when you're preparing the FY24 budget,
Yes,
maybe that's an extra column that you can add this year,
we can maybe do that.
because I think that is helpful.
Yeah.
Because if things get bad,
Yep.
we have to start prioritizing, and mandates are not
Yep.
optional.
I don't think that would be hard to do.
Okay.
I think it would be a very simple column to add.
Okay.
A very small one.
And then just circling back to the highlighting the lack of impact the state actually does in funding circuit breaker.
Yeah.
We have $569,000 increase in tuitions based on a state agency allowing these schools to increase them 14%. And what the state's going to do, because they don't fully fund circuit breaker to the level that they're required to theoretically by law, we're getting $42,000 more offsetting that 569.
And just to be clear, so we're not, a small percentage of that 569 is actually new students, correct?
Yeah, now
The majority of that increase is based on the 14%, but I also think that the enrollment has slightly changed.
So to put this in perspective, so we do have, and you asked me the numbers, so we have 2 students that are aging out. We, however, have 6 students that we will be responsible for, or have become responsible for, during this fiscal year. In some cases, we're not responsible for them this fiscal year, but will be responsible next fiscal year, because they've moved into town.
So
Basically, that
so in
account-
FY '23,
Yep,
2 students are aging out as of 6/30 this year.
Yes.
I know the end of the school year, but let's just use the fiscal year.
We'll use the fiscal.
And then, so in FY '24, we have 6 students who are already here or coming.
Right,
That will be all out of district.
yes.
If they move in during the year and they're out of district, we're not responsible until the fall.
Oh, okay. So we'll have six students. Some of them are already here, but they will all be on
They'll be
our
our
rolls
Next year.
on 7/1.
7-1. And in the memo, I talk about a base tuition. So that's the base tuition, and the variance between those two numbers, the students aging out and the students we'll be newly responsible for, is $294,362.
And so the just shy of 500 for the 470 is just the increase.
Right.
That's
The
that
balance.
14.
The balance to the
So,
569.
so,
right?
and I don't know what that is, 60%, 66%?
Yeah.
Is that 14.1%, and then we do have new people coming in.
Yep. And that is as of January 1st. Obviously, again, I suspect that probably the first meeting in January will give you specifics. I haven't talked to the
February.
superintendent yet, but, and we'll obviously give you the latest numbers we have at that point.
Yeah, at some point, we got to develop our budget.
Right,
And I know
exactly.
I know we've already started this process. We started it back in December.
Oh, yeah.
So, but at some point, we got to put the first draft, right? And we've done this every year. We've made changes as close to town meeting as possible when something happens. But at some point, we have to commit to the number.
But it's, and I know one of the things that I've talked about with the superintendent is we've talked a lot about the fact that we have the federally mandated special education costs as one significant part of this, and they are no doubt a significant part of this. But we've also, we will be facing for FY '24 really a perfect storm. Everything from the fact that school choice, we will not be able to contribute as much as we have in the past to offset teacher salaries. So that's going to impact the budget. To the fact that, we're really proud of our staff. We really love them. We don't necessarily want them to leave, but we usually have a few retirements we can count on, but not this year. So we have no savings we could possibly think about taking in retirement. And honestly, in looking at where this is headed, there may be help from the state. We certainly would hope there is help from the state. We'll probably get a first guess when we see the governor's budget and the first cherry sheet come out. But we're gonna have to do some cutting. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. I don't want to say it, but
No, I was more going to comment, I don't like your analogy, because I don't know if you saw the movie, but the boat sank and everyone drowned, so it is a perfect storm, but
well, I'm hoping that maybe we can have a few survivors.
I would like some survivors. I think your acknowledgement of we can't make up this deficit with end-of-the-year savings or a small grant here or there. There's no way that we can get a balanced budget without an increase in revenue that does not significantly impact our staff. And we're not prepared to have a conversation of how many and where they come from, but it would be more than a couple, and it would impact all aspects of the operation, from administration all the way down to custodians and everyone in between, and it would be teachers and aides. And I know if people watch this and listen to this, that will concern them, but things are not looking good, and we're fighting to try to find the money so we're not in that position, but we're fighting an uphill battle. And I'm not prepared to prepare the cut budget yet. I think there's some meetings to have and some conversations to have. We also agreed at the tri-board to have another tri-board as soon as the first budget came out. There was no need to meet again. It was giving us the opportunity for us to ask you a million requests and for you to pull up the data, and then we can go from there. So, Mark, do you have any? I don't think this is the final draft of this memo, but anything jumping out at you?
No. We just have to, I think it would be, we have to work through these numbers. I think I'm glad that there's been some responsiveness from our state legislatures. I would hope that we can get meetings with them sooner than later. As Terry mentioned, the governor's cherry sheet will come out in the next couple of weeks, but we need people working on this at the state sooner than later, because we can't be sitting here hoping in March and April that when the legislative budget is going to come out, and I don't know that anybody's going to be able to do anything for the governor's budget, but if the governor's budget doesn't specifically address this, we're going to have to spend most of February and early March planning on having no funding from the state.
So just for clarification, I wanted to get this memo and have this conversation on camera in an open meeting. And then I'm following up tomorrow to the email traffic with Erin and the senator and the rep. So we're
Well, and it's just coming out.
I understand.
There's only, people just got sworn in 3 days,
A week ago. Yeah.
Whatever. But
No, but it's time. But there was also, we needed to get some more data.
Yeah.
Because sitting across from them and saying things are bad, well, what exactly is bad? What does it look like? What's your numbers? Go ahead.
No, I'm really encouraged by the fact you're having the meeting. There's just one other key aspect besides the numbers that I think is important to have in your conversation, and that is the formula that ends up being used. So if indeed the legislature does its job and adds money to, mitigate this impact for not just us, but there are school districts around the state. Honestly, I've seen some increases that are worse than ours from some of my brethren. But a lot of times what will happen is there'll be a formula, and it'll be based on the same old, which kind of ignores a small town with Millis demographics.
Right.
So somehow or other, it has to somehow provide some kind of balance, maybe that's the wrong word, so that it's really addressing what individual districts are facing for these increases in mandated costs, because that's a different sensibility than simply looking at socioeconomic demographics.
Oh, and I think you're exactly right. Here's what I will say. As much as I care about what's going on in other towns and cities, I am there as a representative of the Millis School Committee fighting for the town, right? Because this is a town issue. Because what money comes into the town, there are town side issues that need to be addressed. There are school issues. So even though we're here as a school committee and a significant impact on our budget is coming from decisions made at the state level, it's a town issue. Mm-hmm. Because the more money we can get from the state for education, the less money there's this give and take between the town and the schools, fighting for a small pot as it is. We don't want to be in that position. So
Agreed.
I understand what you're saying. There's a philosophical conversation to have. I'm there wearing my Millis shirt. I don't have a Millis shirt, but if
We'll
I
make
did,
one- we'll make you
I
one.
would wear it and say, I'm here for Millis, speaking on the behalf of Millis residents. Plain and simple, at that point, that's what our job is. So it's a fair point. I understand what you're saying. Because too often it is the gateway cities and the big cities that get all the time and attention, and they have the larger tax bases. They have more capacity than we do on a good day.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a question for Mr. Wigan and Mr. Mulaney. I seem to recall that the business directors and the superintendents were also putting things forward. Has that garnered any even feedback or?
I'm not aware of any.
Well, we certainly have a, someone in our corner,
Okay.
in the Assistant Commissioner of Education, Jay Sullivan. But I think like I think was pointed out, the legislators have just been sworn in. So our lobbyists, we have joint lobbyists. Our lobbyists really haven't had the
Sure.
ability to kind of talk with anybody
Yeah,
yet
yeah.
in any real substance. I did not go, I have a legislative tracker that I'm privy to, and I did not look today to see what bills have been filed. But before the next meeting, I will know
Okay.
the types of things that have been filed, so that may give us also another hint.
And has this come up at either of the collaboratives? Like of the collaboratives, only because it's the school, like representatives from school districts all over the place, and sometimes they try to use those board meetings to kind of
Yeah, I
have
mean-
common discussions about,
Yeah, that has.
hey, we're trying to do this.
Yeah, that has been brought up at our collaborative meetings.
Yeah.
And at a recent accept meeting, there were also representatives from the DESE zooming in.
Oh,
So we were able to underscore
Sure.
the significance of that increase.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
Yeah,
Like
right,
I said,
right.
I haven't heard anything back from that
Sure.
joint letter
Yep.
from MASBO and the MASS, but it's something that people are not, they're not shy about bringing it up.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on that? Mr. Wigan, I think Any other good news in your packet? You wanted to talk about financial,
Well, let's talk about financial real quick, 'cause
Let's
I
do
have to
it.
tell you, in many respects, I think it's one of the more positive financial reports that I've ever given, where the projected fund balance is decreased from the last report. But I want to tell you why I think it's a positive report. We spent a lot of time just drilling down and encumbering everything. It's a very conservative report. I expect, and in fact, Bob and I already talked today about something that may free up funds. I expect that come springtime, I will be able to free up funds that right now I'm basically encumbering, both in staffing and even some expenditure lines. So I do think this is a worst-case scenario before you. I'm not really expecting any surprises at this point. I think I know where everything is. The last surprise, I hope it's the last surprise, I should knock on wood, was some things that we have to do with the boiler system here in this building. But that's taken care of in that estimate. So I actually feel, despite the fact I'm showing a positive fund balance that's lower than the last one, I actually feel quite positive about it.
we're still looking at a negative fund balance of 447?
Before the adjustments.
That's
And we're gonna
fine, yeah.
we'll be starting to make those adjustments.
And those adjustments will get us to where?
17,000.
17,000.
Can change, yeah.
And we've had this discussion, I'm sorry, but it's been a while. And these are real adjustments,
Yes, these are real
and
adjustments.
that's part A. Part B, can we live with them? Meaning,
Yeah, there's nothing there we can't live with.
there's nothing there that is to the bone where we shouldn't be going.
No.
But when we start to make these, when we get into FY '24, these things don't exist
No,
anymore.
they
So
don't
now,
exist.
we're really stripping it down
Right.
to where now it is staff.
And when, there's a couple of things we'll obviously be talking about in the next few weeks, and one of the things that we'll be bringing up is certainly in February, I think, as part of our budget process, we'll be talking about the other revolving funds and their fee structure. We'll probably talk about the facilities rentals and that fee structure. Now, I'm not saying raising fees isn't gonna solve the problem. But in some cases, it may, in a certain revolving fund, I haven't done the analysis yet.
Right.
So this may not be true. But in certain cases, adjusting the fee slightly may continue to keep it away from a fiscal cliff. And that would be my goal, not so much that it's going to solve any particular
No,
problem.
I'm not opposed to that, but here's what I would say. I think we should look at all of the fees. The one that you pick, though, is one that we continually give people breaks on. So we're going to raise the fees for the small percentage of people that actually pay 100% and continue to give 50%. I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
Well,
And then maybe there's a discussion about maybe we're not giving 50% breaks.
We're not having an executive session tonight, and if we, at the next meeting, have an executive session, I can tell you one of the reasons that I think it's important we do this, for that particular, for the facility fees.
Okay. You understand my bigger point?
I do. And you're right.
I think what we did for extended day was right.
Mm-hmm.
I start going above that. That's a voluntary program. The rest are really, it's tough. But anyways, we have a lot to.
No, and again, I think that's the other thing, is because they're not gonna solve a problem, if we propose fee increases to you, in my mind, we're gonna propose something because it's purposeful.
And I think we all acknowledged during the extended day that we needed to, we pushed and we pushed.
Right.
And I'm not sure I think we need to, it's not gonna solve problems, but it's also gonna help us when things get really bad. It won't be as dramatic.
Right.
I agree with that. Maybe that's part of the budget proposal. And I know that we're gonna work on meetings, getting some meeting dates. There's 2 people missing, so I'll send an email out to figure out at least a couple months' worth of meetings. January's almost over. Perfect storm, huh?
Like I said, I'm looking for survivors.
I'm gonna send you Alone in the Wilderness. You know that movie? The guy who lived in a camper? You know that one?
Is that the one where
You
he
know that
fell
I
in
asked
the
my
rock?
class-
Is that when
I
he
asked
fell
my
in the
class-
rock and fell and got stuck in the rock, the hiker guy?
No, he cut his leg off. No, the kid,
No, I
the
know
kid who
that.
went out and lived in a bus in Alaska,
Found the bus.
froze to death.
Yeah. No, I don't remember that one.
Yes, he wrote. It was
I
John
don't know
Cracker.
that one.
They just came out with the
Oh, okay.
I asked my class they were all freshmen, first year, so we don't call them freshmen. That's a bad term. None of them had seen Goodfellas. Thank you. Thank you. And they're looking at me with dull, vacant looks.
be an assignment.
You're going to have them watch
It's a
it in
criminal justice
class?
class. I am going to make an assignment. They'll have to get permission slips because there's a lot of swearing in that. All right, anything else, Mr. Wick?
They're first students. I think they've heard swearing before.
They're my students.
I was gonna say, do you have permission slips to go to your class?
I say, the first thing I say is, I have a potty mouth, I'm going to work on it. And then 3 minutes later, I've violated it. So anyways.
I have nothing else I don't.
Okay. You've given us.
Thanks so much,
Terry, thank
Terry.
you. I know you got a lot going on. I'm not asking you questions, just ask questions.
I know you're not.
You understand that. So I appreciate what you do and the fact that you're getting, I also think it helps us to have, it's a real run up to the budget process.
Right, it's useful, it's all useful information, it's all information that one way or another I would be creating anyway, so.
Thank you. I
I'm not
appreciate
really
that.
duplicating.
No, I
any
appreciate that, Terry. All right, we did the project update, we did the budget update, the budget update and the sped update was one. Superintendent's report, we did the health survey, enrollment, we did the financial report. You want to handle enrollment?
Yeah, enrollment,
Please.
essentially, we're down two students in the district. High school picked up one, middle school had 2 move-outs. Clyde Brown had 2 move-outs, but 1 move-in.
And so currently Clyde Brown is at 541, middle school's at 268, high school's at 316. There's been no change in enrollment at ties or out of district enrollment. 7 in ties and 21 in out of district.
So Bob, in the document that we have in our folder, there's notes in each one. So that where it says transferred, that's move out.
Yeah, that's a move out.
Just want to make that distinction.
Okay, is that it, Mr. Mullaney?
That is it.
Okay, so our next meeting is on the 31st. We do not have executive session. Or do we?
Tonight?
No, no executive session.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Conroy?
make a motion to adjourn.
That's a great motion. That's a great second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
See you on the 31st. Goodbye.